Last time we were talking about races and racism, part one, and we looked at what the Bible had to say about the origin of man, the fact that all of us are related. How many races are there? One. What is it? Human. The human race. Good. Is that Armel I see come in there? And Carl? Hey, come on in, you guys. Make yourself at home. Pull up a piece of the table. Yeah. That's good. How many of you have heard of... Okay, let me try that again. I'll let everybody finish welcoming Carl and Armel back. They haven't been here in a little while. It's good to see you both, Carl and Armel. Yeah. We got a little different. A few things are different since you were here last. Yeah. And we have some visitors from some of our satellite groups here today. I guess I'll go ahead and introduce them. Johnny Walker, raise your hand, from Mount Laurel, New Jersey, and Michael Cox from the Hartford, Connecticut area, and Ben Wallach over there in the white shirt. The guy looks like one of the Mormons on his bicycle that you see in your neighborhood.
I'll be coming to your house later.
Yeah. Ben is from Peoria, Illinois. Today we're going to be ordaining Ben and Walter after the second service, so hope everybody sticks around for that. Okay, last time in this class we were talking about what the Bible has to say about races. Now, how many of you have heard of interracial marriage? How many of you know people in interracial marriages? Let me see your hands. No, you don't. Because interracial marriages require multiple races. Isn't that right? Now, if you know somebody that married an animal, then you know somebody in an interracial marriage. But if they married a person, then it's not interracial marriage. You know, this is sad, but it's a fact that in the Bronx Zoo, several decades ago, but in the Bronx Zoo, you could go and they had a cage where they had an orangutan and a pygmy, African pygmy, in the same cage as a supposed illustration of evolution. Have you ever heard of that before? It's a fact. The implication was, well, this African pygmy is lower than us white people on the evolutionary scale, and he's closer related to an orangutan than he is to a human being. And that's really sad. It's really, really sad. You know, we as Christians probably shouldn't use the word race in the sense that it's used today in our culture, because the Bible clearly refutes that entire concept, right? What does the Bible say? We're all descended from the same two parents, Adam and Eve, right? Not only that, we all came from Noah, which means ultimately we're all related, so we can't have interracial marriages, right? Is there anything biblically wrong with a black marrying a white? Is there anything wrong with a Hispanic marrying a, Asian? No, they're just people who grew up in different places, that's all. There's nothing in the scriptures that imply that shouldn't happen. Racial purity simply means don't try to procreate with animals, okay? That's all it is. Get it? All right. Let's talk about today a little bit about the races and genetics, and actually Steve will probably jump in from time to time and correct me because I'm sure he knows more about this topic than I do. Let me also say that much of the information that I'm going to be giving you today comes from Ken Ham and his Answers in Genesis website. So it's not all original with me. I am not a scientist, and I don't pretend to be a scientist. All right? So what I'm telling you is not stuff that I thought of myself. All right. Let's look at what do racial differences involve. See, one of the problems is we look at the exterior of a person and we don't look at all the interior, right? I mean, when you look at somebody, you don't see all their organs, their bones, their muscle. You don't see any of that. What do you see? Skin color, hair color, eye color, height, weight, you know, those kinds of things, those external characteristics. The fact is, according to genetics, there is only about 0.2% difference in the DNA of any two human beings. 0.2%. That's very, very small differences in any two human beings. And that includes any two whites, any two blacks, or any black and any white. There's really very little difference genetically between us as a people, because we are all descended from the same parents. Now, number two, if you are in for a kidney transplant and let's say you're black, do they have to find a donor who's black? Do they care what the so-called race of the donor is? Why not? Because it doesn't matter. That's why not. It doesn't matter. I mean, the color of your kidney, I mean, your kidneys are all the same color. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, right? What does that imply? The fact that organs from an African work perfectly fine in a, white European, or vice versa, right? What about blood transfusions? Do they, when you fill out your questionnaire, when you give blood, do they ask you what color your skin is so that they can make sure that that blood goes to somebody who has the same color skin as you do? No, why not? Because we're all related. Now, your blood types have to match, right? That's important. But your skin color doesn't matter, and who you descended from doesn't matter, right? Did you know that the Bible teaches that God created, when He created animals and He created man, that each group would reproduce only after its kind? Isn't that right? Now, there are variations in kinds, just like there's lots of different kinds of dogs. Why are there lots of different kinds of dogs? Do you think God created poodles? How many think God created poodles? And how many think God created German Shepherds or Alaskan Huskies? Well, the fact is, all of those species of dogs are simply bred from wolves. Did you know that? They're all different. They've been bred from wolves. And breeding is done by doing what? Matching certain males with certain females because of their characteristics. And doing this over many generations in order to filter out the unwanted characteristics. Isn't that right? That's how they do breeding. All breeding over generations loses genetic information. It filters out the things that are unwanted in those dogs. And that's what's happened with human beings as well. All right. Can a cat and a dog procreate?
No.
Why not? They're not the same kind. Yes.
You do have a tiger and a lion that can.
Yes, that's because they all come from the same common animal. They have developed what appear to be differences over time. Any animals that can procreate with one another have originated from the same kind. All right, but because of circumstances, environmental conditions, adapting to certain circumstances, these animals become more specialized because they lose certain ability to adapt in certain circumstances. We're going to get into that, excuse me, a little bit more in a little while. Now, you might think, well, skin color, there's a lot of different skin colors. Isn't that right? How many think there's a lot of different skin colors? You're wrong. There's only one. There's only one color, skin. It's just some is lighter or darker, but it's all the same color. All right? And why is it all the same color? Does anybody know why? I know Stephen knows why. What gives skin its color? Oh, it's on the screen. Melanin. Now, your body produces melanin. Do you know what it's for? Go ahead, Ben. Huh? Except for Ben. Ben is our token albino. Come here, Ben. I gotta get you on video. Okay. Ben has no melanin whatsoever. You know, I told you guys before that Vera said that I was like, you know, really, really white when she was introducing the preacher to one of her daughters. Yeah, well, Ben makes me look dark. Oh, yeah. In fact, at the house the other day, he was staying with us. I told him that I didn't mind wearing shorts in front of him because his legs are wider than mine. Sit down, Ben. Anyway, why is Ben so light? He don't have much melanin. In fact, his body isn't capable of producing very much melanin. What does it do, by the way? What does this substance do? It gives pigmentation. You know what it does? It acts like sunglasses for your body. You all wear sunglasses, right? What do you wear sunglasses for? To protect your eyes from UV radiation. Isn't that right? Do you know what melanin does in your body? It protects your skin from too much UV radiation. It acts like sunglasses in your skin. Did you know that differences in skin color, what we call differences in skin color, differences in hair color, differences in eye color all come from the very same thing, and that's different amounts of melanin in your body, in your eyes, in your hair, or in your skin. It's a fact. All right? So what's the difference between us? Some of you got a lot of melanin, some of you don't. Why do you think that's the case? Just a guess. Take a wild guess. Why do some people have a lot of melanin? Different. You think the climate affects it? Okay. It does actually over time. Adam, were you going to say something?
Yeah,
that's what you were going to say? Yeah. How do you think Ben would fare if he lived near the equator and he was a farmer? Okay. He's got light blue eyes. He's got hair that's almost as white as mine. And he's got very white skin. What's going to happen to him? He's going to get cooked. His brain is going to turn to scrambled eggs because of the sunlight. There's nothing to block the light from the sun from making the top of his head into a frying pan, right?
That's why I have copper.
His eye, yes, yeah. I mean, in fact, we were talking about how much sunscreen he has to put on when he gets out in the sun. Otherwise, he's in deep trouble.
If it's below 50,
yeah, he's in deep trouble. Now, do we need sunlight? Does your body need sunlight? Why? I know Stephen knows why. Vitamin D. Your body produces vitamin D from sunlight. Stephen, tell us what the importance of vitamin D is. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay. It's actually a hormone. It's not a vitamin.
Okay.
Its action chemical in your body is hormonal.
Mm-hmm.
And it participates in almost every major chemical reaction in the body.
Okay, so it's really, really important.
It's a major regulator of
Yeah.
immune function, which allows us to tolerate things in our internal and the external environment.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this, Stephen. If Ben and Ebony live in the same location and they work out in the field, farming, let's say, who is going to get the most vitamin D?
There's a genetic component.
Okay, without other components.
If you're just looking at sun exposure, it would be bad.
Yes, by far. He's going to be producing lots of vitamin D. Ebony is not going to be producing very much vitamin D, but it will be sufficient if she's out in a lot of sunlight. Okay? Now let me ask you this. What's going to happen to Ben if he gets too much sunlight? He's going to develop what? Skin cancer. That's the biggest problem right off the bat, right? Skin cancer. Also, cataracts are related to sun exposure, too much sun exposure. Okay? His brain's going to get baked in the sun, right? So, what we see when we look at the differences, these external differences, is that some of you here would do much better in a hot, sunny climate than some of the rest of us. And what we also see is that guys like me and Ben, we do pretty good in a cloudy, overcast, northern climate where there's not a lot of sunlight, where the summer season is short, the winters are long, where we live in the latitudes where the sun is low in the horizon. They're not directly overhead, right? Because when the sun is low in the horizon, the atmosphere is filtering out a lot of that UV radiation, right? So me and Ben, we would do pretty good living in Iceland or Northern Europe or someplace like that. We'd do pretty good because our skin is so light, we would produce plenty of vitamin D even in low light, even without having a lot of light, okay? While some of you other folks, you would be deficient. With your darker skin, you'd be very deficient in vitamin D, and it's very important to your health. All right? So that's that's a problem. So, again, some of you folks would do very well in a location that's close to the equator. And some of us would do very well far away from the equator, all right, up in the very high northern or very low southern latitudes. All right, we seem to be adapted for those things, and we're more healthy and robust in those certain conditions. All right, now, let's talk about DNA. And I know, listen, I'll probably say something wrong, and Stephen, if I do, you can correct me, okay? Because again, this isn't my forte. But DNA is basically information that is coded into every human being. And it instructs all the cells what they are to do, how everything in the body is to function, how it's to develop. When a baby is born, their DNA contributes to who they are and to their growth and how everything develops. Your eye color, your hair color, your skin color, how many kidneys you have, I mean, everything is dependent on this. It's like a computer code that's built into all your cells in your body, I believe. Isn't that right, Stephen? DNA is in every cell of your body. It instructs your body as to what to do and how to do it. All right? It's part of God's design. Now, the information that makes you, that makes your body be what it is contributed by both your mother and your father. But by getting all this information from your mother and your father, you don't need all that information, because you need to be two people, you need to be one person. Now, when we say we get that from our mother and our father, what are we talking about? We're talking about in the woman's egg and in the male sperm. This DNA information is all there, and it's encoded. But what else do we know? During reproduction, what happens? A woman has many eggs, and man has many sperm. And it just so happens that this particular sperm happened to fertilize that particular egg, and the DNA information here may not all be the same in all these eggs or all these sperm, but it's all information that has come through the parent, that the parent has carried. Now, the fact is, you carry a lot more information than your body actually uses to produce you and make you what you are. And there, in fact, in genetics, there's called dominant genes and recessive genes. All right? You carry information that you might inherit from your parents, and you might pass it on to your offspring, but it has never actually controlled who you are. That is, it's just passing through you. All right, you guys get that idea? So the concept is there's a lot more information in that DNA and in those genes than what your body actually uses. It chooses sort of randomly, through certain processes, but it chooses which ones you're going to be. So you never know what a baby's going to be. You don't know what its gender is going to be. You don't know what its hair color is going to be. You don't know what its eye color is going to be. You don't know if it's going to be fat or skinny or tall or short or weak or strong or a mutant. Like a poodle is a mutant. Right? Like your dog Gizmo there, Steve, is a mutant. Right? So there's all this data that gets combined, that gets mixed up, that gets filtered out through one particular sperm fertilizing one particular egg from this particular human being and that particular human being, and portions of it come together and are selected to make you who you are. So the point that I'm trying to make is that you carry a lot of genetic information in your cells that do not define you, that you simply are passing along to the next generation. All right? I didn't see any hands go up. Okay. Now, make sure I got through all my notes there. Hold on. Yes, I did. Now, what does the Bible say happened to mankind? See, what's important about this, what we're talking about, is that what we see from the way genetics works and what we see when we look at all the different people groups around the world, and we see that there are people with different color skin and different color eyes and different color hair and some other slightly different features. We see that it's all of these characteristics that you see are not because a person has evolved more than somebody else has evolved, but it's because certain genetic information has been lost over many generations within the people group that you happen to come from. Like, for example, the people group that I happen to come from, and Ben happens to come from, Northern Europeans, probably. Is your family from Northern Europe?
No, I'm
Norway, there you go. Way up there. They have lost the ability, the genes, the characteristics that cause his family and his people group to produce melanin has been lost over many generations, or greatly reduced over many generations. And this is what you get, a mutant like Ben and me. Okay? Now, as I was saying, the Bible says that mankind at the Tower of Babel, that God confounded the languages. What did you say? Oh. God confounded the languages, and what did that do? It caused... What is that noise? Whose mic is it? It's my mic? Just go back there and hit the mute buttons one at a time. No. Walter, just hit the mutes one at a time until you isolate it. And then turn them back on. Figures. Okay, which one is that?
CD player.
CD player? All right, leave it off for now. We'll turn it on when we play the soundtrack later. Okay. All right, thank you. I don't know what happened, but the CD player's acting up. What was I saying? Oh, okay. So one person tell me what I was saying. Norway. Thanks, Spencer. Tower of Babel. God confounded the language. And what did that do? It caused people groups to become isolated from each other, right? Prior to that, everybody stayed together, which meant they were all intermarrying amongst each other. So whatever the gene pool is for that whole mass of humanity, it was constantly being remixed, right? So nothing was being filtered out. But when God confounded the languages, it forced humanity to move into other directions and isolate themselves from the people they couldn't speak to anymore and understand and communicate with anymore, right? Now, if you let's suppose, just for simplicity's sake, let's suppose that one group, let's just make it very simple. Let's suppose that when God confounded the languages, he only split them into two groups. And one group camped out somewhere near the equator. And the other group moved to Norway, way up in the far north. All right? What's going to happen over several generations? What do you think is going to happen? Your skin is going to get darker? His skin is going to get lighter? Why? All right, but why? Why is that happening? That's what I want us to understand. It's not that we're evolving.
It's an environmental adaptation.
All right, go ahead, Christina.
Well, the equator group's going to produce more melatonin consistently.
Melanin, not melatonin. Melatonin's a sleep aid.
Well, okay. Well, so they're going to produce more.
But why are they going to produce more?
They're in the sun. It's more extended. They don't need.
Yeah, but the sun isn't causing them to produce more.
Their gene pool is isolated. Their gene pool is isolated, they're separated, and now they have just that particular information that their body...
No. I know Stephen, though. Or Kathy, go ahead.
Survival of the strongest.
Okay. You've heard of survival of the fittest, right? It's often confused with evolution. It's actually sort of a slang term for evolution. But it's actually, there's some truth to it. And that is, the people who are robust and flourish well within a particular environmental setting. Let's say, those of you folks here who are dark, and you're in Africa, you're going to do well. You're going to do well if you're near the equator. You're going to do very well. Okay, why? Why are you going to be healthy? Because, first of all, you've got enough dark pigmentation in your skin so that you don't develop skin cancer, you don't develop cataracts and things of that nature, right? So you're going to tend to be healthier, while people who are a little lighter aren't going to do as well. All right? So what's going to happen to the people who are a little lighter?
More disease.
More disease.
Die earlier.
They die earlier.
Closer.
They're not as healthy, right? Now, what happens is, if you see this developing over several generations, when people are looking for a mate, and this has been true since the beginning of time, but when people are looking for a husband or wife, one of the important things that they look for, and you may not think about it, but it's part of what you're thinking about, is you want somebody who's healthy and robust, not somebody who's sickly and weak, right? Isn't that right? I mean, a man wants a woman who can produce a lot of children. I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about back in the day, right?
Robust women.
Yes. No, I didn't say rotund women. I said robust. You look for a healthy mate. So what does that mean? That means that people who are flourishing in a particular environment are more likely to find a mate, are more likely to produce more children. And their children are going to tend to inherit their genetic makeup. All right? So what you'll see is, if you got, let's say we've got people of average color between me and Ben, or between Ben and, I don't know, May. Okay? Whatever the average is between that. That's what Adam and Eve were. Okay? They were brown skinned, but not real dark. As their descendants move into certain climates, your children are going to tend to be a slight variety. Okay? There's going to be variety. There's always some variety. But the children who are a little bit darker are going to tend to be a little bit more healthy in that environment. Right? And after many generations, what you find is the lighter skinned people tend to get sick and tend to die off early. They tend to have less and less children. So when you figure this over many, many generations, what you find is, as a group, the average is getting darker and darker and darker and darker until they reach, the maximum that your body can produce of melanin. And the exact reverse happens in climates where there's little sunlight, where there's shorter growing seasons, right? Where there's long, cold winters, where people are indoors, for 3/4 of the year, they're indoors because, the time when they can be outdoors is very, very short. So they're not getting a lot of sunlight, right? Now what's going to happen? Vitamin D deficiency is going to happen, right? But those people who are a little bit lighter are going to do a little bit better, because their bodies can produce vitamin D a little bit easier than somebody who's a little bit darker. So they're going to tend to be more healthy in that environment as well, right? Same with eye color. Cataracts are developing among lighter-eyed people who are living in very sunny climates, and so forth. All right? So what happens is, over a long period of time, over many generations, the genetic information that is being passed on to you from your mother and your father, you happen to get whatever it is randomly. All right, whatever you've been dealt, that's what you are. But you will do either pretty good or not so good in a particular environment. And those who do very well tend to have more children. And so the population shifts in that direction. All right, and eventually, those lighter-skinned people, in a climate near the equator, those lighter-skinned people die out completely. That is, the genetic information that causes me and Ben to be as white as we are gets lost over time as each child is, the genetic information is sorted between sperm and egg, and that information gets lost. So the reason we are so different now, many years after God created Adam and Eve, is because if you trace our genealogies back in time, you will find that some of us are descended from people who lived in certain environmental situations that filtered out certain characteristics because the other characteristics were better suited to that environment. Now, there's another factor also in this, and that is cultural sorting. It's not only the environment and people being more healthy in a particular situation, but culture has something to do with it as well. That is, some cultures think that fat women are beautiful, right? Some cultures think skinny women are beautiful, like, some of these models and stuff. Some people think blue eyes are desirable, or blonde hair is desirable. See, there's different characters. Now, if you look at different tribes around the earth, in different parts, you'll find that what people consider to be desirable traits are completely different in different places. It's because of the way culture has developed. And a lot of it has to do with being healthy and robust, but a lot of it is based on other things as well. And so when people are looking for a mate, some people, some of you folks, as you dated when you were young, that some of you folks had, like some of you guys had, 25 women chasing after you. Some of you girls had a bunch of guys chasing after you, and other ones had a trouble getting a date if their life depended on it. Right? You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Well, the fact is, people who have certain traits in certain cultures tend to be considered handsome or beautiful or whatever it happens to be. And so they have a lot more luck, if you want to call it luck, getting a mate and having a lot of kids than somebody who looks like a freak. Okay? Does that make sense? So what happens is those things get filtered out too because of culture. So we have environment as playing a big major role in this, and also culture playing maybe a lesser role in it as well. But you can see that after many, many generations, just 1 second, Spence. After many generations, a lot of the capacity that is built into humanity to be able to adapt to these various cultures, because we have a wide range of possibilities, what happens is this information gets sorted and weeded out to the point where we are now no longer able. If I'm married to Diane, and she's not as light-skinned as me, but she's fairly light-skinned, right? If the two of us, were living off somewhere and we didn't intermarry, and our kids didn't intermarry, and our grandkids didn't intermarry with any other people group, our kids would always be white, right? Light-skinned. Because the ability to produce that in our offspring has been lost in the people groups that we have come from. But now let me ask you this. What happens if a black man and a white woman, very white woman, produce a child? Sometimes they're very beautiful babies. What is that called? What is that baby called? Mulatto. Okay, mulatto. Mulatto means that the parents are opposite, black or white. Okay? President Obama is mulatto. His mother was white, his father was black. Isn't that right? Now, did you know that if you take two mulatto children from different couples, okay, so you got one couple over here, let's say the man is black, the wife is white. They have a mulatto son. Then you have another couple over here, and let's say the wife is black and the man is white. And they have a mulatto daughter. Both of them, their skin color is going to be about an average between the mom and the dad, normally. But not always, okay? Now, let's say two mulatto marry each other. Did you know that within that one generational jump, all of the genetic information is regained again so that their children can be anywhere from dark, dark, dark to as light as Ben? Not only that, there's examples. In England, there was an example of two mulattoes that married who had twins. And one child was black and the other child was white. But in every other way, they look the same. Isn't that amazing? And why does that happen? Because the genetic information that was lost and all filtered out was regained again, and so they had a lot of potential again, a lot of adaptability there again. I'm sorry, Spence, I know you had a question and I ignored you, sorry. What was it?
What are your thoughts on diet and migration? Like, if someone's saying, hey, it's really hot here, this isn't working out, I'm going to move like 100 miles north and I'm going to do a little and hey, there's this food over here that's going to help me be healthier.
Yes, diet had a lot to do with it. Because if you move to different locations, the available food is going to be different, right? Like, for example, in some places in Africa, they depended on hunting, primarily hunting for food. Right now, let's take that as an example. If your primary source of food is hunting, rather than farming, the Northern Europeans tended to farm. All right, let's say your hunting is your main source for food. Not only that, if you live near the equator, what is your growing season if you're going to grow food? Pretty much all the time. Yeah. You don't have a short growing season, right? Okay. Let me ask you this. Does your body need to store up a lot of fat for the winter because there's not going to be a lot of food? No. You don't need that. So what's going to happen to the ability to store a lot of fat? You're going to tend to lose it, or at least it'll be reduced over time. Not only that, if you're dependent on hunting, you got to be fast on your feet because you're not using a 30-06 rifle with a scope, right? You're using bows, things like that. We're talking going back a few years, right? You have to be fast on your feet. You have to be athletic. And if you're not athletic, what's going to happen to you? You're not going to be able to provide a lot of food for your family, and your kids are going to be sick, and they're going to probably die young, right? So those people who tended to be more athletic because they were hunters, what happens? That quality of being athletic tends to become more dominant in that people group, while the people group who need to store fat for the winter because they have very short growing seasons, and for a good portion of the year, you're going to be indoors where you can't really hunt, you can't really do anything. You have to store up food, and then you have to kind of live off of the fat that you store. You need that ability. Your survival depends on the ability to store fat, right? So you can see even body types can change over time in these kinds of environmental situations, all right? Did you have something to add to that, Steve? I thought I saw your finger going up.
You know what you're talking about is what's called phenotypic expression.
I had no idea.
You have your genotype, which is your DNA blueprint.
Yeah.
And some of those things are going to happen in your life, and there's a whole bunch of DNA potential that may or may not turn on for either an individual person or a group. And that genotypic potential gets expressed through your environment, through your lifestyle, through your experiences. And so for certain people, certain genes will turn on given a specific environment, whether
Yeah.
it's dietary or whether it's geographic
Yeah.
location. So there is, even within the broad potential of DNA, there's a lot of variability.
Yes. In other words, what God created when he created Adam and Eve is he created them to be very, very adaptable to a very wide range of environments. That is, they could live in the far north, or they could live near the equator. They could hunt or they could farm. They could do whatever it was. They had the ability to adapt to those situations. But what's happened over the generations is, as our people groups have been separated and have adapted to certain places, we now have become less able to adapt to other places that are different from where, this particular type thing, worked its way out. And food source is a very big part of that as well. Yes.
Also, blood type, right? Because for the O positive, you can be a donor for any blood type.
Yeah.
Apparently, that would be the more original blood type.
I don't know anything about that. You can ask Stephen. He's the doctor in the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've heard of eat for your blood type.
Well, I know it does affect your diet. Does do better with certain diets do better with certain blood types. I think.
Like
Yeah.
I'm more of a meat eater.
Yeah.
So I'm
Oh.
more of a hunter.
I don't really know. I don't really know the answer to that one. All right.
And one more question.
yes.
for you. What about incest? You talk about isolated people isolating their DNA. What if they're completely isolating their DNA
Because of incest, and it causes birth defects?
Yeah. Is that,
Yes. Yes. Now, what happens, you have to also keep in mind that there are mutations that occur randomly in people's DNA. And mutations are mistakes in the coding that happen for various reasons. All right? The problem with, originally, when God created Adam and Eve, there were no mistakes in their DNA. And they could marry their brother or their sister, and everything was perfectly fine. And they did. But as the mistakes begin to accumulate over time in various people groups, you tend to have the same kinds of mistakes in a particular people group that don't exist in a different people group, but they have different kinds of mistakes in their DNA, okay? And when you keep mixing them up, what you're doing is you're kind of helping, you're strengthening the gene pool. You're making the mistakes so you don't have a lot of the same mistakes showing up in the same person, because it takes more than one gene to affect a certain part of the body. You need multiple ones. If you got a lot of mistakes in a particular area, if you have very close relatives marrying each other, what you're doing is you're getting a lot of the same DNA mistakes together, close together, and it can lead to a lot of mutations and things like that. But originally it wasn't that way, because the mistakes are something that has accumulated over many, 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 many generations. Okay? At least that's what I read from Ken Ham in Answers in Genesis. He actually answered that question that way. So I assume he's correct, because he's a scientist and I'm not.
Is there anywhere in the Bible that says we should, for that reason?
Well, we know that originally Cain, for example, and Seth married their sisters, right? Because there were no other people, but there were no mistakes in the genetic code, so that wasn't a problem. But by the time, just one second, Samari, by the time we get to Abraham and then the people of Israel and then God giving his law, the Bible says you shall not marry a close relative. The Bible forbid it. And the reason was not because God didn't want people to be happy, because they were in love with their, cousin or whatever. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the genetic component comes into the equation. And so God forbid that for that reason. All right? Okay. Let's see here. Okay, I've covered all that. All right, one more thing. Now, sound science, sound genetics prove a couple of things. Number one, that all humans are related to each other. We all come from, in fact, there's been a study on the mother side. And you've heard of the, mitochondrial Eve. Science has proved from genetics that all of us are descended from the same woman. That's pretty remarkable, given what evolution has taught over the years. That, you got all these, some of us are closer related to apes than we are to humans, like the pygmy they had in the Bronx Zoo, which is not true at all. The DNA between that pygmy and that orangutan were completely different. But because there were some similarities in the features, maybe of the face and the color of the skin, we can pass this off as, these are related. Nonsense. That's ridiculous. It's not true. All right? So, what we see is that sound genetics prove, number one, that we're all related. Is that what the Bible says? Yeah, we all came from Adam and Eve. And then down through Noah and his wife and his 3 sons. Right? All right. Also, in order for what we see today to have become what it is genetically, there had to be a time when the human race that had descended from that same parents were broken up and isolated into different people groups that migrated to different areas. And there had to be something that happened to cause them to do that. And the Bible tells us the answer to that as well. The Tower of Babel. Right? God broke up the people groups and he told them to spread out and fill the earth. And that's what they did. So based on all those things, is there anything wrong with interracial marriage? Yes, there is, because you can't marry animals. Remember? There's only one race, the human race. And if you marry someone of a different color, that's not interracial marriage. Okay? That's just marriage. If you marry an orangutan, then you got a problem. Okay? That's interracial marriage, and the Bible's against that. All right? Okay. Any questions, comments, challenges? Yeah, Samari.
I have a question about Abraham.
Yeah.
I think it was Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
When he went to the king and he told him that was his sister, his wife.
Yeah.
He said it was his sister.
It was his. Well, it was a half sister.
But didn't they make it seem as if he told a lie?
Yeah.
But
Well,
sexuality.
he told her to say it was a deception, because by saying she's my sister, the implication was she's not my wife. That was what he was saying. He was doing it in a roundabout way. It wasn't a direct lie, but it was an implied lie in that case. Yeah, he did that because he was afraid that Pharaoh would, Yeah. Hey, let me ask you a question. Who would be the most healthy people, theoretically?
The one closest to the midpoint. The one with the greatest variability and adaptability.
Okay, that's right. The one with the greatest variability and adaptability, and where you don't have a lot of the mutation mistakes all located in one part of the DNA. Or where it's the few mistakes are spread out, right? So if you take a very dark man and a very light woman and they marry and you have a mulatto, that person theoretically would be more healthy than I would be. Now, I mean, there's many, many other factors as well, of course. Some people are predisposed towards, cancer or whatever it happens to be. Diabetes runs in my family, both my mom and my dad. No, I'm sorry, both of my grandparents on my mother's side and my mother. But anyway, there's a lot. It's much more complex than what I'm telling you. But by illustrating it this way, you can see how the Tower of Babel radically affected humanity. And what we are here today, we have a mixed group of people. We are the result of what God did at the Tower of Babel. Just like you can go to the Grand Canyon, and the evolutionists have their interpretation of the Grand Canyon. Oh yeah, these layers developed over millions of years, and that little Colorado River cut this big, huge canyon, right, over billions of years. Yeah. But what's the truth of the matter? That's a scar on the landscape from the flood of Noah. That's what that is. A lot of that water, when the water receded from the earth, was trapped up north of there for quite a while, until a partial dam gave way, and all of a sudden all this water comes gushing down through there, and it carved out, because there were layers and layers and layers and layers of silt, of mud that was laid down by the flood. And all this gushing water just carved out that whole thing. And then, the layers hardened and so forth. And what we see out west, there's a lot of evidence of the flood of Noah that is really the only good explanation for how it got that way. What we see, when we look at the people groups around the world and we look at each other, it confirms the Bible. It really does confirm it. The Bible tells us how all this happened. Now, the Bible, what's funny is the Bible doesn't try to say, well, this is why black people are black and this is why white people are white. It doesn't even go into any of that. It just tells us the story of history. And when we use good science to compare what we see today with the history that the Bible tells us, we see that they fit together perfectly. That is, the Bible is really giving us accurate history of what happened. Right? All right. Anybody else have questions, comments?
I was just going to say, I was at the Brookfield Zoo with my kids last year, and they have in the ape exhibit, first you go up and you can put your hand over an ape's hand.
Yeah, they have 5 fingers and a thumb.
Little kids, they can go up there
Yeah.
and do that. And then all the displays they have, like they'll have a picture of an ape in a crouching ape position,
Yeah.
and they'll have a picture of a human
Yeah.
next to it with like the internal organs and
Yeah.
all that. You can play with it. I was about pretty upset.
Yep, and of course, you all have seen the textbook pictures of the ape, and then the next picture he's a little bigger, and the next picture he's stand up a little more, and the next picture he's wearing a tuxedo. But yeah, that is deception. That's what that is. It's deception. It's not accurate scientifically. It doesn't explain. They try to explain where all the different colored folks come from. When I say colored folks, I didn't mean colored folks. I mean different colors. Different color folks come from. They try to explain it by saying, oh, well, some people are more advanced evolutionary, than other people. You're closer to an ape and all this kind of stuff, which is nonsense. It's Bigfoot, yeah. I've never. You show me Bigfoot, and we'll talk.
If that was the case, that certain skin-colored people are more evolved than others, you would never see a black person smarter than a white person.
No. And there's smart people and there's stupid people of every color, right? Isn't that right? There's beautiful people and ugly people of every color. There's tall and short people of every color. Fat and skinny people of every color. And all of this has to do, the reason we are so different in the way we look now is because the differences have been magnified over the generations because information has been filtered out because of environment, because of culture, and things like that. All right? Okay. Anybody else? Are we done? We're good? Okay. That's it on the doctrine of man. Next week, we're going to start a new series in this class on the destiny of man. We're going to talk about what God says about the righteous, what the promises are for the righteous, and what the destiny of the wicked is, ultimately according to the Bible. And we'll look at it progressively from the Old to the New Testament. All right? I'm going to try not to spend too much time on that because we already went over some of that already in the Doctrine of Man series. Okay, anybody have any other comments or questions before I shut it down? No, we're good to go.